All right, welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Rivulous Irrigation Training Series. I'm your host, Richard Restuccia, and today we're going to be talking about what I think is a game changer for the industry as we start to educate more people about the actual difference between real-time ET versus historical ET data when setting up irrigation schedules. I think, and I've learned, and we're all going to learn a lot more about this today, but the difference might be more dramatic than we originally thought. So this is kind of a fun subject to talk about. I know a lot of people are interested. We've got a bunch of people sign up, and that's great. And thankfully for us, person taking us through this today is Andy Bellingary. Andy is the national sales manager for Jane and Rivulous Irrigation with the merger. And the thing I really appreciate about Andy is he's a BYU graduate in horticulture. He went to work at Valley Crest as an account manager, managing crews, moved into sales, really understood irrigation, moved to irrigation with Jane. And so he's really got a long-term career in irrigation and landscape. He knows it inside and out. He's also a really fun presenter and really cares about conservation and water management, wants to get it right. So we're lucky that Andy's taken us through this today. Andy, welcome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Hey, thanks for the kind introduction. As always, you mentioned everything I've learned, but what's funny is I still look forward to opportunities to learn more. I used to think before I joined Jane, I used to think, oh, I know all there is to know about irrigation. Then I joined Jane and thought, well, I got a lot more to still learn. I'm sure that's true for all of us, but it's a joy to learn and to have that experience of learning and growing. These webinars help.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? Because I think we all learn every day, and the deeper we get into it, we just learn there's more we don't know.
That's
and
right.
Then I think for all of us that talk irrigation, in our circle, it was eye-opening to ask people, and I encourage everybody who's watching, ask your irrigation people, ask your account managers, ask your homeowner association people, what is historical ET? And you'll be amazed at the difference of answers you get, and as a result, a lot of difference in the data.
Isn't that amazing, though, Richard? That it's learning and growth happens when we pause to ask a question: why, what, how, and that's when we kind of break out of whatever comfort zone we're in, and we begin to expand our minds, and new information comes, and we have those aha moments.
Right, definitely. So that's the fun of it. So, well, anyway, let's get into this, Andy, because I know we got a lot. And the one thing that we're going to point out at the end, or you're going to take us through at the end too, and I just want to remind everybody of that, is we actually on the Jane website now have a real-time ET data port for anyone for no charge. To be able to put in their address and get the real-time ET for their address. Huge resource for a lot of people who aren't on a smart controller yet.
Yeah, it's a great, exciting tool. Look forward to taking everybody through it. I thought it was kind of nifty. Yeah, at the end of the webinar, we'll go through that. It'll be fun.
So now we have the advancing slide issue we were just talking about. There it is.
All right. Richard, you asked the question earlier today, what the temperature in Las Vegas today, and the high is going to top out about 70, 71 degrees. That was our high yesterday as well. Average for this time of year is 57 degrees. And I bring that up to help illustrate the point that just because history says the weather should be a certain way on a certain date doesn't mean that Mother Nature is necessarily going to agree. You can imagine, somebody with a chart says, "Oh, yep, it says right here today this should be the weather," and Mother Nature says, "Wait, hold my drink, I'll show you."
Yeah, right.
I'll do all 4 seasons in one day if you don't believe me. Watch. So weather is constantly changing. So to take a look at this historical versus real-time ET, that's kind of the gist of it. But thought we'd start with the historical ET. What is historical? And the best way to describe that is it is nothing more than a calculation, an estimate of ET, which is evapotranspiration, the water that plants need. When we're talking historical ET, it's based on past weather data and crop characteristics. In other words, it's the average for a given date or a given time. And that date range, to calculate that average, could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be 30 years. I've heard of 50 years as well. And the idea being that, over the long term, that average will play out. The problem, though, with historical ET is it does not account for microclimates or specific conditions in smaller areas, or for the fact that December 6th might have been 71 degrees this year, but December 6th last year was 57 degrees. These weather patterns and changes aren't accounted for in historical ET. We know that because the weather is constantly in flux. So historical ET, while it can tell you, it can get you close, it doesn't account for the specifics. It can happen either through microclimates or the fact that weather is always changing and is varied. The best way to describe it is, you've heard the saying horseshoes and hand grenades. Well, you can throw a hand grenade, you kind of get close, right? And that's what historical ET does. Why is it used? So if it's not that great, right? And if you didn't know by the title slide of this webinar, we are here to convince you that you should not be using historical ET. You should be using real time. But you might be asking, why then is it used? First and foremost, it's free. You can go back and look at this data, what has been measured. And there's a lot of organizations that measure this, and you can look at it over the past 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years. It's free. It's easy to access. And when you have a smart irrigation controller or a so-called smart controller that's accessing that data, the free data, you don't need to purchase expensive weather modeling from weather data sources that are not free, that you have to pay to get. You don't need fancy modeling software, expensive computers or servers to calculate all this, because it's already been logged. It's there to get. I like to tell people the analogy I use is Sunday's newspaper. I don't know who buys newspaper anymore, but nobody's going to pay for last Sunday's news, right? Last Sunday's newspaper is lining the birdcage, but you will pay for next Sunday's news. In fact, if I could sell you the news in advance, you'd pay top dollar for that, because imagine if you could get what's going on in the market 2 to 3 weeks in advance, right?
Yeah.
Historical ET it's inexpensive, it's easy to engineer a controller using that data. But the problem is, the easiest way to say it is, when you have a controller that has historical ET, you have the appearance of smart irrigation management without the expense or high-level performance of actual true smart irrigation management.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Andy, and I knew it was an issue. It really hit home for me recently in the last year. A group asked me to do a water management training for them, and I was teaching homeowners, about how much time to program their controllers. And as you know, that's really complicated. So I wanted to help them out. I wanted to point them to a tool that would help them program their controllers correctly. So, I had to learn the tool before I taught them, and was messing around with the tool, and I set up a zone like the irrigation scheduling tool asks you to. And when I hit the schedule button, I saw the time it was asking me to water, and I said, that seems way too much. And then I looked at what I was watering using an ET water controller, and like, wow, that's about half the time. And so then I rolled up my sleeves and I dug into this a little bit, and I realized using the historical ET, there was a lot of overwatering going on at that specific time. And this is really, boy, the person putting out the schedule wasn't trying to overwater, but just by using historical ET, there's going to be issues.
Right. I love that story because it illustrates exactly that point. I like to, I think back to my days as a contractor. I remember, HOA boards can be difficult. And you get that one guy on the board who's watching every penny spent, and he sends that email. He demands to know why water bills last month were higher than water bills the month before. Any contractor worth his salt knows immediately to look at ET values, 2022 versus 2023, and they'll immediately point out ET was higher this year. That's why. We know that as contractors, we know that as water managers, but for some reason, we don't make the next step going from historical to real time. And, so that begs the question, what is real-time ET? It's pretty self-explanatory. It is an calculated actual ET value based on live weather data. Same crop characteristics, but live weather data. And it could be for a specific date or a date range, but it is, as opposed to historical, takes an average of past performance. Actual is what's exactly going on today. Most of the time, this is measured daily. However, ET water, a little bit more cutting edge. This value is measured hourly, so 24 times per day, and that creates a much more accurate picture. As you go from, you'll see at the end of this webinar, we go from historical to real time, we pick up a bunch of efficiencies. But as you go from daily real time to hourly real time, you pick up efficiencies as well. It just you continue to, as I say, you go from horseshoes and hand grenades to darts and laser guided ballistic missiles. So we want to get to the point where we're throwing darts, and that's really what we do with real time ET
Yes.
data.
So if I understand this correctly, Andy, and it's pretty. I'm going to go back to your yesterday's news. Even if you're using real time ET, if you're not checking hourly, if you get a little rain or a lot of rain a couple hours before your schedule is downloaded, if you don't have hourly, that's yesterday's news then, right? I mean, it's not going to affect your current schedule.
Yeah, or you get cloud coverage rolls in at the peak ET part of the, or whatever. There's little things like that happen. There was a study done by the University of Arizona, and I'll have to double check the exact figures, but I want to say that going from daily to hourly measurement of ET, you could see swings as high as 60 or 80% based on environmental conditions. And this was in the desert in Arizona. That makes sense on a hot summer day. A monsoon rolls in and it cools things off, humidity levels spike, cloud coverage. You can see something like that happening, but that's a big swing in one day. That's the difference of overwatering and wasting water, underwatering, and plant health suffering.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, I can see why having that hourly calculation means so much more than really daily real time, even daily real time. But I don't want to just forget historical.
Yeah, right. So this just a side note, quick pitch for ET water. We're using hourly. it's very accurate. Again, it goes back to that concept of throwing darts, and it helps account too for the microclimates, the specific site conditions that you can't capture with historic. You begin to capture with real time. So when we get into the realm of real time, there is varying degrees of accuracy from 1 time per day to hourly, so forth.
Yeah.
One of the biggest benefits of real time is that we know that the weather changes every day. We know that the climates change; they're cyclical. We see that happening now. I mean, where things are hotter than on average, and then out of nowhere we'll get like we had here in Las Vegas in August, several days where it was only 80 degrees as a high. So when we see these changes, real-time ET can account for that and adjust the irrigation calculation, the created schedule specific to those site conditions. which either means you're watering less and saving water, or increasing water and saving your plants from stress or death.
Yes, that actually makes a lot of sense to me, right? Because, there's no, we get a historical ET, but it doesn't say historically December 6th in San Diego is 30% cloud cover. It just says historically the number is this. So it doesn't take into account if it was more cloudy. And these are the things that affect ET, or if it was rainy, or if it was extra windy, or
Yep.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm stealing your
Oh,
thunder.
no, you're great.
But that's the thing.
No.
It just doesn't know, where the real time knows what the weather is and the other factors that affect ET are currently.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned rain. It doesn't know if you get the rain or not, but it also doesn't know what kind of rain you got. Historically, in January, if I get a slow drizzle of an inch of rain over a period of many hours or days, I'm going to capture in the soil probably close to 100% of that rain. But if I get a random thunderstorm and I get that inch of rain in 15 minutes, I'm not capturing any of that rain. It's all runoff.
Yeah.
And so these are the things, historical versus real time. Rain is just one of them, but yeah, like you said, the cooler or the warmer days, cloudy or sunny. Humidity is a big one. Was it a couple of years ago in Phoenix? They're used to having these monsoons, and humidity goes up, and when there's higher humidity, your plants need less water. But and not to mention the rain that comes along with it. What was it? It was 2 or 3 years ago. They coined the term the non-soom. there was no monsoon. It just never happened.
Yeah.
Which without the rain, without the humidity, without the cloud coverage, your plants. You go back to what is evapotranspiration, right? Those four key indicators. So without those things, your plants are going to need more water. If you were solely based on historical, you wouldn't have been able to capture that. It's another benefit of the real time.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I just want to remind everybody too that we've got the Q&A open. If you've got some questions for Andy or some comments, feel free to put them in there and I'll get them to Andy when it's appropriate.
Sounds good. Well, Richard, I wanted to take a look at some specific examples. I think we've established what is historical, what is real time. If there's any questions on that, happy to discuss it more. But wanted to look at some a couple, get into some real examples. First thing I have is a chart. We have all seen, so this blue line is your average ET. We've all seen these bell curves like this, but I wanted to put in here an actual ET compared to what the long-term average is. And as you can see, there are peaks and valleys all over the place. There are days where ET is much higher, more water is needed. Days where ET is much lower, less water is needed. And what that means to an irrigation manager, if you're not following actual ET, and I put this up here just so people can visualize it, either you're underwatering your plant material, it's going to begin to suffer. It's not going to look good. It could possibly die, or you're wasting water or wasting the opportunity to conserve water. And it can really throw things out of balance. And when we look at some of these other examples, I think this will really become a lot more clear. So here we have, these are 6 different cities: San Diego, California; Walnut Creek, California; Phoenix, Arizona; Las Vegas, Nevada; Los Angeles, California; Wilmington, North Carolina. The blue bar is 5-year historical average. ET difference compared to actual ET. The red is the 10-year, green is the 30-year. So you can see right here in San Diego, for example, the 5-year average ET is 11% higher than what the historical ET has been. And this is going from November of 2022, December of 2022 through the end of November of 2023. So this is the past 12 months.
Yeah, so I just want to be sure I have this correct, Andy. The 0%, that line, which is 0, is real-time ET.
That is real-time ET. And this is so this shows the deviation from real-time ET.
Right. And the bars are the variance.
Yeah.
Overwatering or underwatering, right? Because you showed in your graph before, sometimes we go under, sometimes we go over, yeah. But the variance of being either over or under.
Right,
It's,
right.
it's interesting. Help me out. I understand that if I'm overwatering, right, I'm wasting money on water, I'm wasting money on fertilizer, I'm washing fertilizer past my root zone. I'm just wasting water, which I hate to do. So I get all that, but what about the underwatering? I mean, isn't that a good thing? I'm saving water.
Yeah, you're saving water when it's down here. Um, Kind of, sort of. So it's we'll jump into these. All to answer your question, I think we'll look at three different cities and kind of do a deeper dive into helping understand that, right? Because you're watering less compared to historical ET. On the surface, it looks like you're doing well. First city we're looking at is Las Vegas. And I'll go back here. I do want to mention one thing. You look at this historic average, you say, okay, 3% over 5 years, 1%, 0%. Statistically speaking, it's a wash. But those of us in Nevada, especially those who went to elementary school here and we learned Nevada history, there was a guy by the name of Samuel Clemens who moved to up to Carson City, Virginia City, Nevada, later became known as Mark Twain. And his famous quote is, there are three kinds of lies. There are lies, there are damned lies, and then there's statistics, which is the worst lie of them all. And this is where statistics really start to break down. You can say, yeah, statistically speaking, it's a wash, but it's not. I'm going to walk you through an example in Vegas of why this doesn't hold out. Now, this is over the past 12 months. Every year is different, but I think this is something every contractor will relate to using a smart controller. You can see, so you got December, average ET was higher than actual. You see January, it's kind of all over the board, but plants really aren't growing a whole lot in January or February. So these differences aren't too big, right? Then you hit March. Landscape starts to wake up. This is where we start to see our differences. Our historic average of ET is 11 to 13% higher, which means if we're following average ET, we're using more water than we should. We're wasting water. Okay, there's a 13% savings available by using real-time ET. But the problem gets even bigger when we see April and May. So April comes around. Richard, this gets back to your question. April comes around, and the historic average is less than real-time. So you may be tempted to think, well, I'm using more water using real-time ET. Yes, but if you're following, and I've seen this happen time after time after time, if you're following historical ET average and it's not enough water, when you don't put enough water down on your grass, on your flowers, or whatever it is, and it starts to get hot, what happens to that plant material? You get hot spots in your grass, things start to burn up, they dry out. No landscaper on this planet, I shouldn't say none, but very few are going to sit back and watch that happen, especially in the spring when everybody looks forward to that lush green new growth. So what does the landscaper do? He goes over to that so-called smart controller and says, well, I got to adjust this thing. I'm going to change it from 100% ET to 125% ET, which means it waters more, right? I'm going to bump up the water to try to make up that deficit between what actual ET is and what historical is. And that works for the month of April. And then we go to the month of May, and the difference between actual and historical gets even greater, right? It's even warmer, more water is needed. So contractor goes back to the controller and he bumps up that, he manipulates the controller, bumps it up even more, up to 150%. The problem is, once he's bumped it up, he's never coming back down to readjust it, because June comes around, everything's looking good, and now the average, historical average, is much higher than real time. So not only is he missing out on this savings here, this 8 to 12%, 9 to 11%, he's already adjusted his controller up to 150% ET. So he's overwatering on top of overwatering. And then it gets even worse in July. So July comes around and it dips back down. So now he goes from 150% to 200%. And you can see this really quick when you start to make these adjustments. Everybody adjusts up, nobody adjusts back down. And in those seasons where you can save, those savings aren't realized. And all of a sudden you go from a A smart controller that's based on weather, historical weather, that might be able to save you, 30, 20% of your water bill is now barely saving 3 or 5% because you're making all these increases, but never the decrease. And I think probably the easiest way to illustrate that, and this is using the same exact data over the last 12 months, are these two lines here. The green line is 30-year average ET. The black line is real-time ET over the past 12 months. And you can see in these months here, we need more water than historical averages. So we bump, contractors are going to bump up that controller to compensate. But when you get back to this side where the average is lower, they never lower that controller back down. They never, or I shouldn't say never, very few ever bump that back down, and they miss out on all these savings. So instead of it being a wash, it's no different than in football, right? If you're on the goal line and you fumble the ball and the other team runs it back for 6 points, that's not minus, that's a 12-point difference, right? It's not just a 6-point difference. It's a 12-point. The 6 you didn't get and the 6 they just got. It's the same thing that we're seeing when the danger in using real-time versus historic weather data. Even though annualized it would look like a wash, in practice it is never a wash.
Yeah, so it's interesting to me too. A couple things here, Andy. Number one, you're using Las Vegas on this chart. Las Vegas is a place where if it's sunny today, it's probably going to be sunny for the next 30 days, right? There's very little variation. Yet, you get the hotter weeks or you get the heat waves and you get that extra stress. What will be interesting, and I hope you're going to look at this too, is what happens in places where the weather varies a lot more, Los Angeles or San Francisco, where you get fog or rain or heavy clouds. Does it change this?
It does. It does. One thing. Well, I'll mention one other thing in Vegas. This is a shout out to Tom Radin, because he's always preaching this. We don't get the cloud coverage in Vegas, but in peak irrigation season, one of the biggest impacts on our water use is wind. When you get that hot, dry wind, a 5-mile-an-hour wind is different than 20, and that's different than 50. Imagine a hair dryer in your face, how quickly things dry out. And so, we don't have the cloud coverage, but those winds can be detrimental. Okay, so to answer your question, here's Walnut Creek, California. And you can see where there's a lot of variability in rain and cloud coverage. We can see, with the exception of January of this year, just about every month we're seeing potential savings from 7% to 28, 29% deviation from historical versus real time. That is water wasted. That's money wasted, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, my head's spinning right now, Andy, because I know we've got a couple big HOAs that have multi-million-dollar water bills.
Yes.
And so when you see a 28% on a couple $100,000 in 1 month's water bill, talking about a $50,000 waste, and they might be using a smart controller, so they might think they're okay, but it's using historical, and as a result, they're still wasting a ton of money.
And that's the biggest thing for you contractors out there that have sites that are using a smart controller that is not calculating weather, at the very least daily. That if you have a smart controller that's reliant on historical data, you may think, well, how am I going to pitch a smarter or the smartest controller to this board of directors? This is how. When you can come in, especially if you have a $3 million water bill, annual water bill, even $1 million, even a few $100,000, when you're looking at 6, 10, 12, 14% savings, if you could reduce your water bill by going from a smart controller to the smartest controller and save $180,000 and improve your plant health, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, well, and look, it means, right, everybody who's buying a house in an HOA, the first question is, what's the association fee? Right. And usually one of the top 1 or 2 or 3 line items on an HOA is fees are landscaping and water. And so if you can keep this down for the HOAs, I mean, not only are you saving water, but you're keeping the value of the HOAs even higher.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. So, one more example I wanted to look at, just demonstrating the historical versus real time. And this is a site in Wilmington, North Carolina, kind of the almost exact opposite of what we see in California along the coast, the East Coast. And this is a site where um, if you had a weather-based controller following historic ET averages, um, you're going to be in a world of hurt. You're losing plant material at this point, and then you're constantly trying to catch up. And then when you're trying to play the catch up and you're increasing the water, it's just a stab in the dark because you have no idea how much it should be. And so you do that January, February, March, and then May, June, July, you're wasting water again. And you come back August, September, October, November, you're either again wasting water, wasting money, or you have plant material that's dying. In this particular case, Richard, you had mentioned this to me that this was a drought, right? That was in North Carolina. How do you account for a drought with a historical average on your smart control? It can't do it. You're the only way to account for a drought or an extremely wet season is using real-time ET. I heard the example once. It's like driving a car. If you're not using real-time ET, or if you're not using predictive analytics, you're looking through the rear view mirror trying to drive forward, and it's never going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, Andy. And yeah, historically, we don't have droughts, right? The drought means it's not the norm. So yeah, and the historical ET is going to be watering you said you're going to be in trouble. You're going to lose plants here. You're going to have a really stressed looking landscape if you're still watering to historic ET. We've got a question coming in, and this question is, can a local weather station in a grove produce more accurate real-time ET value?
In a local weather station, depending on the quality of the weather station, yeah, you have mission critical weather stations that high end, very scientific, very accurate, and then you have the $25 Walmart special that records just the temperature, but we call it a weather station.
Yeah. So, yeah. Right. I mean, the dollar value is all over the place for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, we could have another webinar, get a weather station manufacturer come in. They're going to say the same thing. Well, if you're using high quality sensors and tools, you're going to get more accurate data. Just like we're talking about, well, historical only gets you so far. Real time is the key. All else being equal, if you're level the playing field and you have a high quality weather station, yes, getting accurate readings in a specific location is going to be is always going to be better.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah. Okay, so let's switch over to Richard. You mentioned the tool.
Yeah.
That we have. We're going to do a live demo here.
So, Andy, this says get real-time landscape irrigation calculator. This is using real-time ET. And really, if I live in Mexico City and put my address in, it's going to work. If I live in Florence, Italy, it's going to work. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. And I've only tried my address. I take that back. I tried an address with a couple of customers during the IA show. At the end of the webinar, we'll show the link where this is located, but you could go out to the Jane website and look right here. You can see it right there. You can just click, and that's going to take you to, that's exactly how I got to this page.
Yeah. Right? Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's amazing that Jane's supplying this for no charge, and it's going to get you real-time data for your location, which is the thing that's so hard for people to get. How do I get real-time ET for my house? Where do I find this? Yeah. Well, I used to say get a Jane Unity or an ET Water smart controller. Well, guess what? We can just get it on the link too. You don't even have to buy the controller.
I just put in my address, and see this little hermit crab that is out by my neighborhood. If I zoomed in, it could drop it right on my house. But here it is. I got the hermit crab sitting on top of my location. Scroll down a little bit more. Okay, so how it works. Enter your zone details. So we'll do that first. So list of stations. I'm gonna click on the add station button and I get this. Okay, station 1. I'm gonna call this station, we'll call this grass. Keep it easy, but it's we'll call it warm or cool season grass. Spray head, we'll make that sandy loam, flat, and we'll do, it's on the north side, shady all day. Okay. Let's add another station here. Station 2, we'll call this drip.
So I can basically just add all my stations then.
Come in here, you add all your stations, but I'm just coming up with examples. And you can see here in the plant type, I could choose flowers, ground cover, trees, warm season, cool season grass, shrubs or bushes, cacti, vegetables. So, and this is not as in depth, nowhere near as accurate as the Jane Unity scheduling tool, but we have some default settings. This would be your crop coefficients, so to speak. So if we're shrubs and bushes, we put in there, and that's going to tell the scheduler, okay, this is going to be the approximate crop coefficient for this location.
So Andy, one thing I wonder is, how does it know how much water's in my soil today?
Oh yeah, so the assumption is when I put all this information in that I just watered last night, and starting right now I'm sitting at field capacity. I am on full to the brim.
So it's not going to really, so what it's going to tell me is when I should water next, based on real-time ET at this moment.
Yeah, so I put the information in, click on update, and voila, I've got I should water Saturday for 10 minutes. I get a little schedule this coming Saturday for the grass for the drip zone, looking at 10 days before we need to water again.
That's pretty cool, and that sure worked pretty fast, which I appreciated. And I guess the other thing that this could be really helpful for, certainly setting schedules, but also if I'm still working on a manual controller and I know what I've programmed that manual controller, this would be a great way to check my settings, right?
It would, yeah. Throw it in and see how it compares. But everybody here has seen an infomercial in the past, right? And the famous saying from every infomercial is, "But wait, there's more." So this is not an infomercial, but wait, there's more. So we get to see this cool little chart, a real-time daily ET. You can see the ET today is 0.08. I want to say, and I'm going off memory here, this time of year in Las Vegas, it's 0.05, 0.06, somewhere in there is about average. So this time you can see today it's higher. The ET is higher than average. It's almost double in 2 days from now than average. So, and when I first looked at this schedule up here, I would think in December, there's no way I'd water that frequently. But when it's not cloudy and it's warmer and it's a lot more sunny and my ET values are double, well, it would make sense that I'm watering twice a week instead of once a week. I mean, it begins to make sense. But here's something that's really, really unique. Nobody else can do this. People might use the term predictive, but they don't know what they're talking about. ET Water does it because of our predictive analytics. We can look out not at a what the future historic average is going to be, but because of the complex weather data that we purchase and we model, and it's hosted on these servers. I mean, the high-end cost that goes into this, we can, with certain degree of accuracy, because we're doing these calculations every hour, 24 times a day, we can look forward and have a very good idea of what the future ET is going to be. This is a feature we call predictive analytics. So for those of you who are saying, how does he know in 2 days ET is going to be 0.123? It's because of this predictive analytic feature. Nobody else has that. You can, well, now you know where to find it. So
Wow.
you come
Yeah,
here
actually,
and see it.
AI and irrigation management. We don't hear much about that because not many are doing it, and that's great to learn.
We started this webinar with the importance of asking questions. Ask your irrigation smart controller manufacturer to show you how they do this, especially for those who say they use live weather data or they have predictive analytics or they can use forecast. Ask them to show you. And then compare it to ET water, and the difference is apples and oranges. Again, it's guessing versus actual scientific based forecast. But wait, there's more, right? One more thing I wanted to show. So I can see in here in this tool, you can also see, I can see last 2 weeks, this week, and next week. 2 weeks ago, actual ET was higher than historical. In fact, 28% higher. Last week, actual ET was lower than historical. This week, it looks like it's pretty close. Oh, 0.6. There you go. And next week as well. So that's the you can see that average holds true there. So becomes I plugged this in for one of our customers in Arizona. The savings was every week there was a savings, and it was in the 30% range. So I'd invite everybody to go out to this website, plug in your address, share your results with us. I would love to hear from people around the country what your schedules are coming up, what the savings are coming up to be, and it'd be interesting to open a conversation.
Andy, we got a question from a viewer that you're just going to love.
Okay.
And this is the question: how does real time account for block days, like weekends? So how does how do we do that? How do we include that into the irrigation schedule?
Yeah, I've got a slide, another presentation to address that, but we're able to, because of this predictive analytics, this dynamic scheduling feature of ET Water, we are able to adjust for that and either water ahead of time and fill the root zone going into the weekend so that it can get through. Or again, that predictive analytic feature, be able to look at the forecast and say, hey, we're going to be just fine making it through. We can go without water Saturday and Sunday and make it to Monday. Mike Palumbo did a fantastic webinar on this feature. If you go back and look at it, I think he answers that question of how we account for these municipal restrictions and block days.
Right. I just go poof with my brain on this one because, right, if you're supposed to water Saturday, but it's a block day and Sunday is a block day, Jane Unity looks at this and can make a determination. Maybe I should water Friday then because the plants will be so stressed over the weekend, they're going to die and they'll hit permanent wilting point. Or it might make the determination, hey, I can wait till Monday. But it's so cool that it makes the determination. It actually looks at it and figures that out. That's mind-blowing, right?
No other controller in the market does that. And this is where, man, I think a lot of contractors understand evapotranspiration, but I don't think they understand really the nuts and bolts, the ins and outs behind what makes real time so much more accurate. And hopefully we're able to illustrate that a little bit today. But when we get into the hourly, it gets even greater. When we get into this predictive analytics, dynamic scheduling, it gets even greater. I mean, I can't tell you how many times as contractors here in Vegas, we had a block day and we'd miss a schedule. So what was the default thing to do? Go back up and crank up ET to 125, 150%, lower your trigger to like, only 30% depletion instead of 50%. All these things we would manipulate just to kind of sort of get enough water in there. But as we did that, our ability to save grew smaller and smaller and smaller until the so-called smart controller was only, slightly better than the dumb controller. And all the savings go out the window. And it's the same reason, and I'll end with this here, but the same justification to go from a dumb controller to the smart controller. And that justification is this. Nobody has time to create a schedule and run through the calculations every single day and then go out to every controller and make those make those adjustments, right? And that's the justification to use a smart control. That same justification to go from historical weather data to real time holds true. You do not have time to look at what the real ET is, compare it to historical, and make the adjustments. If you're going to use a smart controller, let the smart controller do everything and manage that process for you.
Yeah. Andy, we have just a couple seconds for these last two questions. One is, what's the default drip precipitation rate?
Oh, I'd have to go back and look at that. It was based on a 1 gallon per hour, 12-inch spacing, and I believe that is
0.6.
0.6 inches per hour. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. And then another question.
0.6.
Where are you getting, what do you get? Where are you getting your weather source data on this?
The historical or live?
Live, the real time.
Live. Yeah.
For this tool, right?
Yeah, as ET Water, we've got a network of weather sources. This is we talked about weather stations in the past. You know, that concept of mission critical weather stations, the same that keep planes in the sky. We have that. We're using Doppler radar technology. I mean, there's multiple sources, and to being able to model this and calculate it, bring it all together to where it is it's beyond just a physical weather station. We can create a virtual weather station based on exact coordinates of longitude and latitude. So it's not as simple as a simple reading. It's a very complex modeling process that'd be another great webinar.
Yeah. Hey, when I lived in rural America, we used to get ET off of the news on the radio would provide it as well as the news at night. But this is a lot different now. Satellites, Doppler radar. It's fantastic.
And like I said, I'd end here with the screenshot that we just saw, the real-time irrigation calculator. That is the URL. If anybody wants to screenshot that, my contact information is below. Please feel free to reach out anytime. Again, I would love to hear your experiences using this tool. I would love to hear from everybody what controllers they're using, and I'll throw out a challenge. Let's do a side-by-side comparison. Let's take we're confident in what we do. Let's take your weather historic weather-based controller and compare it to real time, and let's see the differences. And once you understand and once you see the differences, and you'll be a believer yourself, let's go convince your customers that it's the thing to do as well. It's going to make your life easier, help your customers save water, save money, and it'll be easier for you and your irrigation technicians to manage.
That's awesome, Andy. We'll have to call that webinar the historical versus ET, real-time ET throwdown or something.
The throwdown, that's right.
All right. Well, listen, Andy, great job today. And please, if you're watching, use Andy, email him, call him, use this tool, and get into how much water you should be saving, or additional water you could be saving using real-time ET. It's going to justify the cost and the time. And, if you have customers, they're going to really appreciate that. If you are the customer, just think of the money you're going to save. Anyway, thanks, Andy, for doing this. Great presentation. Thanks to all of you for joining us. And remember, you can see all our trainings at janesusa.com/trainings. I know we're down to the last few weeks of the year. We have several trainings, maybe close to 100 that qualify for continuing education units with the Irrigation Association. Take advantage of that before the year runs out. Again, thanks, everybody. Really appreciate your time, Andy. Talk to you later.
See you guys. Bye.